The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Amen. Hello everyone, Ron again, and in this video it's time to talk about resonance and subtractive EQ. In the previous video, we discussed what resonance is, the different types of EQ, and when and why you would use the different types of EQ. So here we're going to demonstrate how do you locate resonance and how much to EQ. How do you know? Are you going to cut your voice or you're going to boost it? And sort of like why? So let's look into that. As previously, this is my live vocal chain, but we don't need that anymore. So that's gone now. Today we're going to focus on this vocal. And as I said, we're just going to solo the EQ to see the effect that the EQ has by itself. So let's take a look at it before. Turn the headphones up. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. And after. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. Now that is the beginning. This is what it sounds like with all the effects. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. So notice that subtractive EQ is just the first step to achieving total clarity. So, as previously discussed, each one of these is called a node, and one that's increasing is called a boost. One that is decreasing a frequency is called a cut. Now, you know this is subtractive EQ because it is comprised of cuts. Now, why did I cut at these particular frequencies? The frequencies or frequency ranges that you see here, I chose to cut at them because in this particular recording, that's where I heard resonance that I did not like. So the first EQ that's subtractive, as I said, is always for the purpose of trying to clear up what is not sounding good. You hear terms like making something brighter or making something warmer or muddiness and clarity. Now, clarity basically means what it means definitively. Like it means to clarify something, make it sound clear. That's exactly what you're trying to do. But how you do that can take different forms. So people ask, should I compress first or should I EQ first? It depends. In this vocal, if I did not hear resonances, then I would have compressed first. But I heard things that I wanted to take out that resulted from the difference in how the microphone hears me versus how I hear myself when I speak. And I wanted my voice to sound like what I feel that it would regularly sound like if I was speaking to another person. So therefore, I had to take those resonances out. And you can look up, I think it's called impulse response, the way a microphone processes different frequencies. And there's coloration that is added by the room you're in. So you can look up acoustics to learn more about that. But basically, that's the reason behind it. It may not be that you're doing anything wrong. It may not be that you have a bad microphone. It may just be how it is. Every room is going to change the nature of a sound somewhat. So you have things like bass traps, or when you see the triangle padding across the wall in studios, you see triangles hanging down from the ceiling. And what those things do is reverb occurs when a sound bounces off of a surface and it returns, but it comes back so fast that it does it multiple times. So the brain does not process each individual instance of that echo. Rather, we perceive it as one continuous sound that decays over time. What the triangles or bass traps are seeking to do is either absorb the sound when it goes to that part of the room or redirect it in such a way that it does not bounce back, because if it switches polarity, when it bounces back, you'll have phase cancellation, which is a much more advanced topic. But just understand that these are some of the things that go into why we have to EQ stuff. You may feel like, well, there's something wrong with my microphone, or I don't know how to record. The purpose of me saying that is because that may not be the case. So let's look at how did I find these resonances. There's two ways to do it that I know of that are commonly done. And the first thing is called a solo band. So in the same way I can solo this EQ, I can take one band or node and just solo that. So now if I play this, this is all that you will hear. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. In other words, if you had my voice, but you took out all the frequencies, they were omitted except for those that are in that frequency range, that's what it would sound like. But because it sounds like that, and it sounds kind of like a walkie-talkie, that's why I know that there's a resonance there. The second way to discover this, if you're using an EQ that does not have a solo mode, because when you have Nectar or you have Isotope plugins, you hold down Alt, you can solo that way. So, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in. The process of finding a resonance is very simple when you do it like that. But if you don't have one that does that, then you create a node, you increase it by say about anywhere from 8 to 10 decibels is what is commonly seen when I've looked up this trick. It's called the bell trick, I guess. And you thin it out and you leave the entire signal as it is. You don't turn any part of it off, but you play it. And when you play it, you listen for where a sound no longer sounds good, or in the case of vocals, where it's hard for you to understand what is being said. When there's vocal clarity, you can perceive the words. That's the idea. So let's listen and let's see that in action here. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths. Now if you listen, you can hear that whistling sound that happens at this frequency. It's a similar type of thing that you would hear if you were using Alt Solo and if you just did it like that. Because the higher you go, the more it turns up. If you scroll, it will get wider or thinner. And so it's really the same idea. You have to be careful when you're using the bell trick that it's not just because there's too much gain or too high of a boost, but this is the idea. So if you heard a sound that's like that whistling sound, then you hold this in such a way that it will not move to the right or left. Say you just affect the gain and then you just turn it down. Now, how much you should turn it down is dependent upon what you hear, right? I'm not going to tell you that there is some way you will always know because, again, let's look at the setup for my live vocal chain versus this. In this, I'm just using subtractive EQ first, and then this will likely be the topic of the next video, additive EQ. But in this instance, I felt like doing both together. And it's not that there's anything wrong with that. It's just that in the case of you working on some audio that's already recorded, it's not going to change. The way I speak will be different on a given day. One day I might have a cold. And to be honest with you, I do post-production on the audio after I record these videos to make sure it still sounds good, despite having a vocal chain. The vocal chain is just, if I was to go live one day, so my voice would sound acceptable. But in a recorded environment, there's no reason that you can't strive for the best quality possible. So that's the idea behind spending enough time and gathering the necessary resources and knowledge to hone your craft to as good as it can be. So for that reason, I did just subtractive EQ here. I located the resonances using Alt Solo, as I showed you here. And in this instance, I chose to make the majority of the nodes be dynamic so that they are just cutting more over time if the signal is louder, and they're cutting less if it is quieter. Except for this one right here, because I heard something where I felt like I needed to have a static EQ in addition to that dynamic for that particular range. And again, this is going to vary depending on whose voice it is, what room it's in. So there's no hard, fast rule, but just know that you're looking for resonance when you do subtractive EQ. You're trying to remove it. You have to train your ears to be able to hear it. So you should practice doing this on some audio that you already know is, say, not as good as it could be, and then just see what you come up with. Try it one day, leave it alone, come back to it later when your ears are fresh, give your ears time to rest, and give yourself another chance. Make sure that you're in the right environment, and if you really want to take it to the next level, you could do what they call a card test, which you do on an entire mix when it's mastered. And you can try it out on different speakers in different places, like the car, listen to it through your phone, and you can get references, compare what you've done to what others do, and continue to hone your craft until you figure out how to do what it is that you're trying to do. So the answer to, do I cut or boost? It depends. Does the vocal have resonances in it? What stage of the process are you on? It's typical for you to cut first to take out what is bad. So that's what I did here. But if you're in the additive EQ section, then you should boost, because you might be trying to change the tone of your voice, as I spoke about the timbre. And you might make it want to sound more warm, which usually translates to adding like a boost down here. More clarity is usually adding a boost over here. But these things come after the point where you have, as I said, taking the core out of the apple. This is taking out the apple core. This is when you're cutting it up. So you're gathering everything into one place. That's compression. And you're saying, this is the apple that I'm going to turn into this dish. The EQ is where you're deciding, the additive EQ, that's when you're deciding how you're going to flavor it. And you could think of these other things as other steps, whether they be the oven or beforehand. You might add different types of spices. And so don't be so, if you're new to EQing vocals or anything else, don't be so hell-bent on trying to pursue perfection. Just do your best, because ultimately that is all we can do. And again, use your ears to determine how much you should do, and establish your workflow so you know whether you should cut or whether you should boost, because eventually you'll become comfortable with your own process and you'll say, well, usually I cut here and that's giving me good results. Usually I boost here and that's giving me good results, or results that I like. And then you'll take it from there. You'll learn over time. So don't be stressed about trying to find a hard fixed process. Find the process that is correct for you. And so with that, I'll give you one more audio example. This is what it sounds like when it is bypassed completely. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth. This is what it sounds like with just that first subtractive EQ, taking out the resonances. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still. And this is what it sounds like all together. Thank you for watching. Have an awesome day. Next video will be additive EQ. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me.